of Seattle, which is one of the smartest cities I have come across. And this illustrates a lot of things. Every year, Seattle sends 100 business and civic leaders to another city. They do this to benchmark themselves, to do trade deals, to understand what the frontiers are, to build relationships. And the most important thing they say of why they send 100 business and civic leaders, everybody pays their own way, by the way. Public, private, and civic, in proportions about 60, 20, 20, go on these trips. They know they need to be on the trips because that's where the leadership is being created and renewed in the city. They'll tell you that the reason they do this is they're building a bond among the city leadership. They're renovating the leadership, and it's a key vehicle for doing that renovation. They're relationship building. So on one of those trips, I went to Shanghai with Seattle. I convinced my boss at the World Bank, I need to know what these guys are doing. The VP for Boeing was on that Seattle delegation to Shanghai. I said, why are you spending $25,000 to bring these two young 30-somethings along with you to Shanghai? He didn't bat an eye. Two reasons. One, we get to know the Chinese who are buying our airplanes. And two, and this was the aha moment for me, we get to know ourselves. We get to know the other people in Seattle who are visiting Shanghai. So when they get back, okay, I have 16 seconds left. So when they get back, they pick up the phone, they have a relationship on the other end of the line with somebody else. So that's the key secret of fast learners. And Seattle and others do this in a continuous process. They know that that's how innovation will take place, and that's what makes a smart city. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, for keeping to the time and also concluding with that Seattle case and the best training money can buy. I mean, that's an interesting statement. I hope there will be questions on that. The next speaker, Mr. Lalit Kumar Gupta, Vice President for Public Sector Industry Business Unit at Oracle. I repeat, Oracle for Asia Pacific and Japan.
Hi, good afternoon and welcome, and thank you for joining us. It's a pleasure to be here today. So let me just start out by telling a quick, interesting story about how quickly the technology adoption is growing. Okay, that's okay. I'll take advantage of that. So how quickly the technology adoption is growing, and it's growing faster than anybody's comprehension. I think it's a well-known fact that between year 2000 and 2012, the mobile adoption grew exponentially. It almost doubled. It grew by 100% every year from 2000 to 2012. So from 2000, what do you think the industry pundits, the industry gurus, predicted the growth rate would be? 12%. It grew by 100%, another 100%, another 100%. Guess how much did the industry pundits predicted in 2003 mobile will grow up by? 12%. It grew by another 100%, another 100%. And then they predicted 14%. And then it again grew. So the technology adoption, the way it is growing, the behaviors, the way they are growing, it is beyond anybody's comprehension. And that will be clearly one of the things that I'll be talking about in my session today. So the topic of today's discussion is Think Global, Act Local, which is basically about leveraging global technologies, global capabilities, global experiences, but in the local context, to the local priorities. When you think about urbanization, and when you think about cities, on the one hand, cities are supposed to be the centers of economic development, centers of creativity, innovation, productivity, etc. But at the same time, cities are also going to be centers for growing pollution, congestion, crime rate, etc. So the question is, how do we create cities that are safer, smarter, and more sustainable? Now, in my role as a public sector lead for Asia Pac and Japan for Oracle, I do meet with a lot of government officials across the region, across the globe. And one of the things that we talk about, how can we create cities that are safer, smarter, and sustainable? The main thing that comes out of those conversations is through citizen participation and citizen empowerment. I think if you listen to this morning's keynotes, the Minister for Urban Development, he talked about how citizen participation is going to be key to creating the smarter cities. And a number of other speakers, I think it all boils down to that. Therefore, in this session, I'm going to focus on two things. One is citizen participation empowerment and some of the top technology innovations that are driving that transformation. I'm going to be able to briefly touch upon these as we won't have much time, but we can talk about those things in more details later. So what do we mean by citizen participation and empowerment? In very simple terms, citizen participation is about allowing the citizens to participate in the government policy making and the government services in a convenient, efficient, and transparent fashion. What does that mean? There are three components to it, in my view. So citizen participation, the first, number one, it is about access to services. It is about citizen services having seamlessly extended to self-service and mobility, to give the citizens an ability to avail of those services through kiosks, tablets, mobile, etc., to be able to use those services anytime, anywhere. The second component of citizen participation, which I think is the most important component, is about the feedback mechanism. How do you get the citizens to provide you with the feedback on your policies and services, and to be able to use that feedback to improve your services and policies? And the third component is about when you get that feedback, what do you do with that? Do you have the ability to tweak your policies? Do you have the ability to dynamically change your policies as you move forward based on that feedback? And what are the technologies that are enabling that? I'm going to briefly touch upon those technologies. So these are the four areas that I want to briefly talk about. I'll briefly touch upon these areas. Social relationship management. This is about getting the informal feedback from citizens about your policies and services. I'll talk briefly about that. Big data analytics, or the city of sensors. Policy automation and policy analytics is about knowing the impact of changes to the policies before you make them. And how do you do that? And lastly, it's about the cloud adoption for accelerated business value. So first, let's look at the social relationship management. Now, why is social relationship management important? Because we need to understand how the citizens today engage, interact, and behave. So today, if there's a fire, robbery, or a crime, right, the witness is more likely to put it on a tweet or Facebook before they call the police. That is the behavior. So how do you do that? So you need to be able to engage with the citizens the way they want to engage, when, where, and how they want to engage. And that is where social relationship management becomes important. So there are three key components to social relationship management. The first one is about listening and analyzing, to be able to listen to what is being said and analyze that, to be able to make sense out of what is out there in the social media. The second is about engaging and interacting, to be able to proactively address the issues and challenges that are being raised before they become a big issue. And lastly, it's about publishing. It's about engaging with them with the right information at the right time with the right people. So social relationship management, in my view, is going to be critical to understanding citizen participation and citizen empowerment in moving forward. Big data analytics. Now, why is big data analytics important? There is a growing abundance of devices that are connected to internet. And these devices, they represent a formidable amount of information that can be used. And when these devices get interconnected and this data can be captured, that is what we call as city of sensors. And what is big data? Big data is all about volume, velocity, variety, and value. So it's about lots of data, structured and unstructured data, variety of sources around CCTV cameras, the number plate readers, the weather information, traffic information, etc. And to be able to make sense out of that data and to use that data to run the city in a more efficient fashion for traffic management, public transport, parking management, etc., etc. And there are examples where the cities have already done that, and we have been engaged with some of those things. So big data analytics, I think this is the city of the future, which is the city of sensors. It is about sensors connected through low bandwidth wireless network and to be able to capture that data and to be able to use that data to run the city efficiently. Then the third, it's about policy automation and policy analytics, right? It is all about being able to understand the impact of changes to the policy before you make them. It is about being able to deliver more targeted public policies to the citizens. How do you do that? There is a natural language-based rules authoring engine, which requires business users to make the policies and make the changes, and to be able to understand the impact of those changes based on current and historical data. I'm not going to go into the details of that, but this is a very powerful tool for one to be able to understand, tweak the changes, make the policies more dynamically changed, and to be able to deliver more targeted public policies. Lastly, I want to talk about cloud adoption. Now, I don't think there's any conversation today that's complete without talking about cloud. Now, there are a couple of points that I want to make about cloud in this context. One is that there is a growing adoption of cloud across government agencies across the globe. There are a number of government agencies that have decided on cloud-first policy. In fact, for the UK government, they have projected that by 2015, more than 50% of the new IT procurement will be on cloud. So when I say there's a growing maturity of the cloud adoption between users and vendors, it is all about frameworks which are available today across security, service levels, et cetera. So the issues that were there 2-3 years ago, I think they're going away. And there are challenges that can be addressed through what is available today. And cloud adoption, in my view, is not just about IT simplification, IT standardization, or cost savings, although these are very good benefits. But it is also about accelerated business value. And I think whenever we are talking about creating smart cities, I think we need to keep cloud in mind for you to be able to deliver those goods. So in summary, we're talking about global innovations, but local priorities. Now, these are all big ideas, the ones that I talked about: policy analytics, cloud, big data, social relationship management, et cetera. And these are all big ideas. And as everybody knows, that big ideas are like babies. They're easy to conceive and hard to deliver. So these ideas, their execution is extremely important. And we can learn from other people who have done that. And there are experiences, and there are examples, and there are references that are available around the world for us to be able to successfully deliver to that. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions later on.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. I think 5 seconds earlier. Wise is the co-founder of Break Dengue and chief hyperthinker at Brussels.
So I'm going to tell you about a project which actually puts in practice a lot of the concepts you heard about today. We were looking at how we can face a global disease that's growing, which is dengue or dengue, and find a way to really go out and connect with people all over the world and exchange these ideas and bring them to the local level. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about this, but first I want to share a quick video.
We may not have celebrities to endorse our work, but we have you. Over the past year, you've helped us put the spotlight on dengue and the 2.5 billion.
I'm speeding it up a bit because it was going too slow. So.
But we have you. Over the past year, you've helped us put the spotlight on dengue and the 2.5 billion people who are at risk from it. Together, we've given a louder voice to the issue and its advocates. We've traveled through Asia and Latin America, searching for initiatives, helping connect individuals and organizations to make a bigger impact. individuals and groups to do more. We're mobilizing people around the globe to unite countries in their fight against the disease. Let's keep working together to keep this a priority.
So what you saw there is a new way to respond to an existing problem. And the moderator said that I was the hyperthinker, and it's actually a way to think differently about problems, a way to break paradigms, to embrace technology, and to become creative when we approach a problem. And I think for the smart cities, we need first to have a different mindset and to think about problems in a more creative way. So we started this initiative a year ago, and what we found is that there's this growing threat of dengue, which is actually one of these kind of unfriendly diseases that doesn't get as much media coverage as malaria and other diseases. So we brought a group of people together and created Break Dengue. We had academics, we had people in the field, we had doctors, we had people who were actually in NGOs, and we asked them how would they tackle the disease? What could we do to combat it? And then we looked at organizations like the Gates Foundation and the health maps, etc., so that we could really get some great new insights. And then we connected with social technology. So we created a Facebook page, which now has over 250,000, that's almost 3 lakh followers from all over the globe. So we're able to tap into all these ideas to find new ways and new solutions and new questions. We actually had someone called Aleja from Colombia who started a journey around the world to ask people what they were doing to combat dengue, how it was affecting them. She started actually from Mumbai and then traveled across India, then Asia, and ended in Latin America, where we launched a campaign around the World Cup. And when she was at the World Cup, she got these red cards for dengue, which became a viral campaign where you put up a picture of yourself holding a red card against dengue. So it really was a way to get people to be more aware of the problem and to take direct action to raise awareness. Now, this actually got us an award as one of the best social media campaigns of last year by the Shorty Awards, which is the Oscar equivalence of social media campaigning. Now, in Mumbai, we launched an initiative, and that's really where the global meets the local. The idea was that we wanted to ask people to come up with the best idea they had to combat dengue. And we would offer them $10,000 to scale the idea and implement it in a different city. Now, after a couple of months, we got a winner, and it's actually a project from Singapore called X-Dengue. And it was very interesting because they wanted to find other cities, other environments to implement the idea. It had been successful in Singapore, but they really liked the idea of the price. So the jury selected this project, and we're now looking at implementing this in India. Now, the way it works, just to give you a quick idea, is that you have your mobile device, and you can point out some places of work or the school your children go to, and you will get alerts on your mobile if there is a cluster of dengue epidemic. So that means if over 10 people have contracted dengue in a certain period of time, you get an alert on your mobile, so you know to be careful, you know to put on some anti-mosquito, you know that this is a danger zone. And we gather medical data and feed it back into the system, and that's really allowed people to be much more aware and to have practical, direct use of this information. So you see here, this is a map of Singapore, and the different dots are actually clusters, and the red ones are clusters which have over a certain number of dengue, so you know there's a problem there, and that you have to be very careful. So imagine knowing around your house, your place of work, or where your children go, that would really immediately change your behavior through the use of very simple and existing technology, and I think that's very important. Now, we would like to bring this project to an Indian city. We're talking to several of them, but we're very much hoping that it will be Hyderabad that will be the first city where we'll be able to implement this. So I'm putting a disclaimer because this is work in progress, but I'm hoping that shortly we'll be able to move forward with this. But actually, even in our initial discussions, we already had one innovation, which is that we thought, why not add malaria data to the same app? The technology is quite similar, but the value you create can be tremendous. So you take an idea from one city, you look at another city, and you start improving it, and you add data that immediately benefits citizens tremendously. So that's what we're looking at doing for the moment, and we want to enlarge the concept to really think, what else can we deliver through this app? So you see here a map that will be online with the same kind of layout that we had in Singapore, and which will be transferred to your mobile or where else you want to get it. And again, technology has already moved on because this project was a few years ago, and we can look at how we can connect this to social. So you could actually, on your Facebook profile, tell people, be careful, somebody I know has dengue in this area, so communicate beyond the simple app to your social friends, showing you that the technology for smart cities exists now. We don't need to recreate anything. We can already use existing technology if we choose to think about it differently, if we choose to shift our thinking. So I want to finish by saying a couple of things, because to make this happen, that's the real challenge. And throughout this conference, you're going to hear about people saying great theories about the smart cities. But as you all know, it's when you put them into practice that it gets really difficult. And even a simple idea takes real dedication to do. So what I'd like to ask you, if in this room, is if you're interested in helping with resources, ideas, support, finance, we welcome you on this project and others, because it's by getting together, by sharing ideas, by mobilizing, that we can make a real difference. So I invite you to join the network. If you go to breakdengue.org, you'll see it. Take action. And very much in the spirit of this project, this is not just for India, this is not just for Hyderabad, this is a global project. Whatever we do here, we share it back with the crowd. So you can then invent ideas and find ideas from other corners of the world and start changing your city. And by changing your city, you can change the world. Thank you very much. I have 2 minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Wise. I think very healthy message delivered in a very short time. And I suppose there will be many claimants to join the network. Of course, he has already proposed Hyderabad. Let me announce Bangalore as another candidate. I hope there will be many others also doing it. Thank you. The next speaker, Mr. Alberto Martin Torres. He is the Manager, Asia Pacific and Middle East, Smart City Congress, Barcelona.
Thank you, Dr. Ravindra. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to be with you today. The topic of this session is Think Global, Act Local. And I think the way we usually look at it is basically as if it just meant that wherever global vision, global view we have, we just need to adapt it locally when implementing it on a local scale. Now, on a theoretical level, this might make a lot of sense, and it's certainly true. But I would like to also suggest another way of looking at this concept, which is that comes from the notion of subsidiarity. If we take, for example, the examples of transportation or climate change, we would usually be saying that they're both global issues because they affect cities all over the world. But then again, the way we need to tackle them and address them will probably differ depending on where exactly we are. But what I would say is the key question is which are the authorities, which are the governments that are better suited to address a specific issue. So that's where this notion of subsidiarity comes into place. I should have put the definition of it in the slide. I didn't, but I'm going to read it. It's very short. It's basically that problems should be dealt with at the most immediate and local level consistent with their solution. So this is a concept that takes place in the very first place when Tocqueville goes to the United States and finds out that there's this dichotomy between decentralization and the colonies wanting to get more power from the empires. But subsidiarity isn't exactly what decentralization is, because decentralization basically argues that the more you can handle decisions on a local level, the better. Whereas what we are saying here is that there's some issues that cannot be addressed on a local level, but rather on a global level because of their very nature. So I suggest we go to look at a few examples so we can understand this a little better. Let's first look at global issues. That means we shouldn't just think about them globally, but also act them on a global scale. The first example that comes to mind is demographics. And I talk about demographics because I'm always surprised when I read about smart cities and I attend forums like this, how little importance it's usually given to the issue of demographics, whereas in my opinion, it's probably one of the most important ones. There's so many problems that are associated with demographics. I could name a bunch of them, from traffic to mobility to overcrowding to pollution. And we usually take it as something for granted. We usually take it as something we can do nothing about. I think that's actually wrong, and I think there's examples that prove otherwise. If we look, for example, at what China has done with its policy of limiting the number of children families can have, we will see that there's actually policies that can be implemented on a global level. Now, I'm not saying it's necessarily right or wrong, I'm just saying we should be doing something about it, because we will obviously agree that there is a certain notion of measure that we should consider when thinking about smart cities. Obviously, cities that are too small will probably not succeed in being smart because there won't be enough talent, enough skills, enough resources for them to succeed. But at the same time, if they become too big, those problems will also prevent them from being smart. So this is a clear example of an issue that needs to be addressed globally, and that it requires both thought and acting. Thought could be also, for example, developing second-tier cities, so that, as we know, the major cities usually act as big magnets because people go to them because of, job opportunities and other sorts of opportunities. So if we are able to create more cities that, also generate these kind of opportunities for people willing to move into urban areas, we will probably tackle the issue of demographics and prevent huge megapolis from, getting bigger and bigger. Another example is that of governance. We've been talking a little bit about citizenship engagement and smart citizenship and collaborative citizenship. Now, I don't mean to say these are necessarily bad, I just think it depends on the case. So, for instance, if we take very technical issues, such as, let's say, waste management related issues, I wouldn't think it would be very smart if the city council were to expect me or ask me about it and how to solve the issues that they may be facing. So in this case, it's probably more intelligent to actually delegate this responsibility on some of our representatives who will be able to address it better than any of us who do not have the technical knowledge. On the other hand, there are cases in which it does make sense to actually ask the citizenship to participate and to be empowered. And I'm thinking mostly of cases in which it has more to do with personal preferences. For instance, in Barcelona a few years ago, there was a big plan of reforming the main avenue, Diagonal Avenue, and the city council considered that because it was going to have such a big impact in the long run, it was worth asking the citizens whether they actually wanted it or not. Now, the result here is irrelevant. People voted no, so it never came into place. But the thing is, in this case, it did make sense to actually ask the citizenship to get involved. So it really depends. But the bottom line is governance is mostly a global issue. Local authorities, metropolitan authorities, city governments usually have a rather limited power in this regard. Of course, they can do some initiatives like the one I just talked about, but generally speaking, when it comes down to establishing the legal framework, the fiscal framework, the opportunities for entrepreneurs, for PPPs, it all comes down to greater levels. Now let's look at some examples about the local issues that should be addressed locally, but also thinking about them locally. The first one is resilience. Resilience obviously affects cities all over the world, but it affects them all in a different way. Every city has its own unique characteristics. Some of them are coastal cities, some of them might be landlocked, some of them obviously face some climate-related issues, other maybe face floods, earthquakes, you name it. I was recently in Japan, and I was fortunate enough to be the witness to one of the projects that is being developed there by Kumamoto City, which, as you know, is in Kyushu, the southernmost island of Japan, alongside NTT. And they were just explaining us basically how they were creating a system whereby citizens would know better what are the safest places in the city where they can protect in the case of an earthquake. Now, this was an extremely complex project, but the interesting thing, and the thing that I found more striking, was that it couldn't be scalable. It couldn't be applied anywhere else. It was tailor-made for the city of Kumamoto, and therefore it's a perfect example of a local solution for a city that's trying to become smarter. So resilience, of course, it is a global challenge if you look at it from the grand scheme of things, but when it comes down to practice, it needs to be addressed very much locally. A different example might be that of housing. I think that's probably the best example in that it reflects that things are usually not either black or white, they're usually in between. So this just goes on to show how much coordination between different authorities, be it the local authorities, state authorities, national authorities, and even regional authorities, sometimes like the EU in Europe, should all be coordinated when addressing certain challenges. For instance, we're now seeing in Europe how some of the capital cities and trendy cities like Venice or Barcelona or Milano are finding their real estate prices skyrocketing. And at the same time, we have the paradox of having many locals unable to access to any accommodation precisely because of this reason. So of course, on a local level, something can be done, and that's why I think this is a prime example of a local issue. The municipalities have the power to expand the cities, to create some sociable and affordable living, but if there is not a regulation that comes from the higher authorities, it's not likely to be fully addressed. So all in all, my conclusion is that there's no particular body that's better suited to address any issues. It all depends on each case. So we talk a lot about citizenship empowerment. We talk a lot about how much cities should themselves take a leading role when solving some of their issues. But I think, in fact, it really depends on each case. So we should try to be very analytical and very rigorous and really see, for each and every case, which is the body that is better suited to answer a certain challenge because of its very nature. Finally, I have 50 seconds, so I would just like to talk very briefly about the Smart City Expo World Congress. I suppose some of you are familiar with it. It's the leading event on smart cities in the world. This year we will be celebrating the 4th edition in November from 18 to 20. There's both an exhibition area and a congress, and pretty much all the key stakeholders in the field of smart cities are going to be present there. So I invite all of you to join us and come to Barcelona in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Torres, for illustrating what is global and what is local, and inviting everyone to Barcelona. I hope you will keep the ticket. Next speaker, Professor Srinivas Chari, who is the Director of Urban Governance Program at the Administrative Staff College of India, Hyderabad.
I'm not going to speak about 100 Smart City Agenda. Tomorrow there is a full-fledged discussion. When we say 100 smart city in India, it doesn't mean that the balance 3,900 plus cities should not be smart. Every city has to be smart. So the discussion is not about what is a smart city, but what should be a smart city agenda. The mayor of Karimnagar is here. He would be thinking, what is a takeaway for today to become a smart city? Not just from Government of India's funding point of view, but what can he do as a mayor that can make his city smart? Let's clear the ground and say what is not smart. This need not be a smart city. This is a dirtiest operation, which is a waste treatment plant. It looks very smart, but it need not be the agenda for smart city. So instead of looking at what is the global and local issues, let me set the local agenda first and seek. When I say local agenda, I come from India, so I'm speaking from Indian perspective, and then seek solutions or experiences. As Tim said, there's so much of cross-pollination of ideas happening. So what do we deal with this? How do we deal with this local agenda? The local agenda is that India is barely urbanized, and it's going to be urbanized much. So there is what is called a late mover advantage in the Indian context. We are just 30% urbanized. When you look at other countries, they are at a which different level of urbanization. So there is a very classic, instead of first mover advantage, there is a late mover advantage. Now there's a significant incremental growth that's going to happen. I mean, HPC report, McKinsey reports, Government of India, 12th five-year plan clearly articulated there's a substantial incremental increase is going to happen. Typically, India needs to build one Chicago every year if you want to accommodate these people. Just a comparison. It defines the scale. So what do we do with it? So there, one side there is a rising population, and the other side we have fewer resources. So the meeting this twin global challenge of accommodating more people and managing this whole urbanization with dwindling resource, in my definition, I think is the future of the smart city of Karimnagar or Ramagundam or Hyderabad. How do we deal with this growing population with limited resources? And we need dramatic solutions. The business as usual is not going to work. The conventional model is not going to work. We need to think of little differently. We need to think little more out of box. This is a classic case of out of box thinking. I don't know who did it. The conventional technology, wheel technology is 6,000 plus years. Even in Mahabharata, you will find wheels used extensively. But only in the last 15 years, somebody thought of fixing this wheel to a box. And now you see every trolley in the airport to, normal things. You will see a bag with wheel. Why it was not thought of 25 years back or 40 years back? So I think smart city agenda is about finding solutions that are very much local to our context. This is another example. In fact, one of my colleagues, she's sitting here, she said, every damn thing need not be networked. In fact, every damn thing should not be, when we talk about smart city, we think of networked. In fact, this is a classic case of networking is very dangerous, especially when we are talking about certain infrastructure services. This is the Department of Biotechnology and Gates Foundation. In fact, they are coming up with in fact, we are working with them with looking at Warangal as one of the case studies. Why water or sewage should be transported all the way in a pipeline, in a wastewater, and then take it to a septic treatment plant or a sewage treatment plant, recycle it, bring it back, and in the name of recycling, create another project and then use it for gardening and like in Singapore for portable application. Most stupid hydraulics. Those who are coming from civil engineering, they would know this is the most stupid hydraulics. Can we think of toilet as a treatment system? And this is exactly the research of reinventing toilet. This is smartness. If India has to progress and accommodate these people, and with dwindling resources, we need to think little more differently. There are ways of accommodating this in terms of demography. There's a big talk just now, the hall was full, and for water segment, the hall was empty, which is a satellite towns and new towns. Now the option there was, shall we accommodate this demographic change in new cities or shall we accommodate them in the existing cities? In fact, there's a mood that smart city is all about new cities. It's not so, in my opinion. It's about making cities efficient and enhancing the livability and productivity of city. Now, this is our living example. This is our reality. This is a local issue. Now we have to think of global solutions. The local issue is we haven't even started our journey in terms of basic services. 45% of citizens do not have access to tap connection. The leakages, as someone was asking a Delhi gentleman from Delhi, what are we doing with 57% of NRW? Can we think of a solution which reduces NRW when we are taking up a detailed project report? Why should it be a retrofitting? The smartness is when we are laying the pipe, it alerts whenever there is a leakage. The technology is available in this HICC convention. You don't have to go anywhere. Of course, Barcelona is very, very advantageous. The technology is available whenever there is a leak, it alerts. Technology is there when you go to the washroom, there is a sensor which tells us that water has to flow. So why can't it be laid on a pipeline? So can we deal with open defecation issue? Can we deal with our solid waste management problem? Can we deal with our governance issues and also water supply gaps using processes and technologies which can bridge the supply-demand gap is something smart cities, not 100, but all of them should be moving towards. the business as usual approach, as we often call BAU approach, is not going to make our cities competitive. We need to have a very, very radical. Now, why technology piece comes into this? Because technology moves faster than society and process. So that's why the relevance of technology is very important. Whenever we talk about ICT, we talk about technology, but technology has a role. I'm not discounting the importance of process improvements, but the accountability issues as well as the societal changes that we need to make cities livable, technology is a fantastic enabler because they are moving much faster. I have 2 minutes. Now, what we are looking at is how technology can be used, integrated in the existing scheme of development plans that we have to make service delivery gaps, to minimize the service delivery gaps, should be the smart city agenda. The smart city agenda is about bridging this service delivery gap, minimizing open defecation, and reducing non-revenue water, improving basic services by integrating solutions, technologies, as I talked about, biotechnology, Department of Biotechnology Intervention. Why not we think of it? Whenever we are laying a outer ring road like Hyderabad, it has to be integrated with ITS, Intelligent Smart Transport System. It should not be afterthought. A smart city would think how other countries have done it. As an illustration, let me give you some examples of how smart cities are thinking about. Smart cities are thinking about, instead of citizens running around corporations, they want to actually increase the degree of separation between the citizen and the city administration through a technology piece called auto DCR. All the development control regulations, none of us, even with experience, can understand the complex development control regulations. So how do we bridge? Tomorrow there is a very detailed session. They have codified all the development control regulations. A plan will be submitted online. No objection certificate would be generated on the same day, not on the same day, in 5 minutes. Like the way we go to get a ticket in probably railway or bookings. So auto DCR is an example of increasing the degree of separation. In fact, it is good to increase the degree of separation in certain ways. This is an example of Rajkot Corporation, exactly like our example of dengue fever situation. Now, Rajkot came up with a fantastic idea of developing a small app costing 10,000 rupees, that's all. Whenever a citizen takes a birth certificate, the citizen has to give, yes sir, citizen has to give a mobile number. The system generates vaccination alert to the parent that the child is due for vaccination for 16 years. So these applications are available local, but these are available very much. This is a last point. A smart city is not about technology. Smart city is about what they can learn. I took almost 25 senior officers to Barcelona and one of the issues that we found is the flooding issue, how Barcelona deals with the flooding. Generally, whenever we have a flooding, we open the pipeline, increase the size of the pipeline to deal with this. What Barcelona did is to dig a pit, like a rainwater harvesting pit. Whenever there is excess rainfall, the meteorological department alerts, the gates on the road opens, the water gets in. Very localized solution. A smart city is the one which learns from other cities these examples and reduces cost, improves the learning time. Thank you very much. There are a number of other examples, but I would stop at this.
Thank you, Professor Chari, for focusing attention on the smart city agenda, emphasizing local solutions and trying to fill the service delivery gaps. The last speaker, Professor Carlo Ratti, Director, MIT Sensible City Laboratory. Sensible, not sensible, and I hope it is also sensible.
Yes.
Massachusetts, yes.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So what I decided to do for the last session, we heard a lot about technology today, this morning and then in all the presentations before. And what I thought I'll do now is actually in the next 9 minutes and 47 seconds, is actually look at the impact of this on architecture. Now, if you look at this man, we heard about him from the president this morning. This is Le Corbusier. He designed Chandigarh, among other things. And in the 1930s, with a group called Siam, he said, in the city, we need to divide everything, the place for living, the place for working, the place for leisure, and the connection. But if you do a city like that, we learned by making mistakes. Then you create like a crazy city, as you see here to the left. You create a city where you've got different portions. They don't talk to each other. They're totally separated, and a lot of traffic between the different portions. So it is no surprise that since the 1960s, all over the world, in the United States, Jane Jacobs and many other things many other people started thinking about mixed-use developments, where you mix different type of activities over space. But actually, I would argue that the smart city is actually going one step further. And since what has been happening over the past 10, 15 years, the way we're using space is radically changing. Almost like a new definition of the transition between public space and private space. And if you want something that might change the very structure of our buildings and our cities. And let me give you an example. What you see here is actually an aerial view of Boston. Boston is actually a very green city. Here it looks a bit like a post-nuke because it's a winter picture, but actually it's a green city. You see Boston downtown, you see MIT, you see it here. Let me see if I can. Here it's MIT, like a little city inside the city. Harvard, don't bother, up there. And MIT was actually one of the first campuses that was totally covered by Wi-Fi in the early 2000s. Now, because of that, actually we saw an incredible change in the way people use space on campus. Before, people used to work, as you see there to the left, and now they work, as you see there to the right. Now, this picture is a bit extreme. I looked for the most appalling computer room I could find. No daylight, just artificial light. And then to the right, it's a beautiful sunny summer day. It's not the same when it's winter and it's minus 20 Celsius. But, it gives you an idea. We are going from something like what you see there at the top, that way of living and working, to what you see there at the bottom. So what we decided to do was, well, what if we could actually use big data? We heard about big data from SAP? No, Oracle. From Oracle before about how data can help us to understand the city and how we use it. So we said, why don't you use the real network that's changing the way we use space? How do we monitor that in order to understand what is going on? So what you see here, you see all the access points on the MIT campus, and if you look at where people are, you get a good sense of how space is being used. So what you see here is actually people in the morning waking up in one part of the campus, moving across the campus, going to another part, and then, you can get this type of curves. This is the curve for all of MIT. It shows you, for instance, people coming to work on Monday. That's here, Monday, Tuesday. On Monday around 9 or 10 a.m. Just a few people stop working around 5 p.m. A lot of people keep working till late, like 8, 9, or 10, 11 p.m. Even in the middle of the night, there's still a lot of activity on the network. And the same pattern happens on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, on Thursday, not on Friday. On Friday, you see activity slips away very quickly in the afternoon. And then Saturday and Sunday are almost like two normal days. If you remove the 9 to 5 people, they're almost two normal days with a lot of activity, with something that it's always there every Sunday night between 9 and 10 p.m. You got this little dent. And that's when everybody says, shit, tomorrow is Monday again. And you remember all the things you haven't finished before the new week kicks in. So anyway, if you do this, and if you do this for every space on the MIT campus, you get like the signature of every space, how people use every piece of real estate on campus. And then you analyze it. You can use mathematical analysis. Here is a Fourier transform, other ways of clustering spaces together. And what you find is actually exactly what I was telling you before, is the fact that space is being used in a much more flexible way today than it was before. And that is interesting because it allows also to use the square foot in a much more efficient way. The city that separated everything was also a very inefficient city. You had to triple everything, and you have a lot of empty space, but here you can use it in a much more efficient way over time. I want to mention this is something we're exploring in a number of projects, of urban design projects. This is a new city in Mexico called Ciudad Creativa Digital, Digital Creative City, where we're using actually the courtyards as spaces, as extension for the offices, as this kind of dynamic spaces for living and working. There's a quick video. Can we have a bit more volume?
Guadalajara, a city of culture at the heart of Jalisco, Latin America, and the world. that has evolved throughout history to become Mexico's Silicon Valley. The once vibrant heart of the city, Parque Morelos, is about to be the focus of an ambitious regeneration program that will transform the
And I will
city.
jump a bit to the
Social
courtyard.
interaction and culture nurture talent, innovation, and creativity. The courtyards, new places of work, rest, and peace, immersed in Guadalajara's year-round pleasant climate, generate a unique outdoor working lifestyle, a new magnet for the world's creatives. The highly responsive urban fabric, effectively a living lab for digital technology platforms, fosters the growth of future media industries. Ciudad Creativa Digital, a unique investment opportunity to shape tomorrow's creative economy. An unparalleled development to serve Guadalajara, Mexico, Latin America, and the world.
Well, we're trying to apply this and some of the knowledge also in other places. This is a building in an extension to a building in the center of Milan. For those of you who know, this is the Scala Theater. That's one of the existing fashion houses. And that extension, again, is based on the same principle, how that space can become a communal space for the neighborhood, like an extension for people's living rooms or offices, where you can go there and continue those activities around this space. And the next thing is also that if you think about this and think about how a smart city can respond, you can also start thinking about more responsive, dynamic places. In the last couple of minutes, I want to share with you what we did with Zaragoza, a city in Spain that won the World Expo. And the theme of the World Expo was water. So the mayor came to us and said, how can we use water, such a beautiful ingredient of planning and architecture for thousands of years, in a new way today because of digital? And the idea was, imagine you have a pipe with many tabs opening and closing, controlled by a computer. Then you can create like a living water wall that opens and closes based on responding to people. So we got the commission to design the building at the entrance of the expo. The building is called Digital Water Pavilion, so all the building is made of water. It expands and shrinks based on how many people you have. No doors or windows, but it opens up to let you in. And then inside, again, your spaces reconfigure based on how many people you have. The roof is also covered with a thin layer of water. And then if there's too much wind, you can actually lower the roof to minimize splashing, or at the end of the day, you can close the building and the whole architecture disappears. Hopefully without anybody underneath. We have sensors for that as well. So this was the building before the opening. I like this picture because this guy was going to the station with a trolley. We heard before the story of the trolley, and he stopped there to say, what the hell is happening here? This was actually the water wall plus projections on the top of it, so digital and physical pixels together. Here it was myself trying not to get wet, testing the sensors. I should tell you now actually what happened one night when all of the sensors that detect people when they approach the building stopped working. And that night we were terrified. We didn't know, the building kept on doing its own crazy things and cuts and holes and openings, but without responding to people anymore. So we were terrified, but that night turned out to be one of the most fun night ever. That night, thousands of kids from all over the city went to the building to play a new game. Not anymore a building that responds to you, but a building you need to engage like this. And so, when we, as architects, engineers, we always think that we know how people will play with the things we design, especially when we think about dynamic, interactive things in smart cities and smart buildings and so on. But then, reality, and especially human reality, is always a surprise. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ratti, for a presentation on sensible city. Before throwing open this session for discussion, I have just one announcement to make. There is one document called D-City, It's about data relating to cities, brought out by GHMC, Government of Telangana, and Cities for All, Hyderabad. Probably this will be available for you to pick up. Now, we'll have about 10 minutes for questions and answers. Before that, let me just say that since this session is titled Smart Cities Agenda, at the end of the discussion, I'll ask all the speakers, each of the speakers, for one idea, one takeaway about Smart Cities Agenda for India. With this, questions, please.
For Karimnagar, as he was mentioning, Karimnagar doesn't have so much of resources as Hyderabad would have. So how a smart city could be made affordable to the people who are living there, who are poor, who are not having equity?
Question of affordability. Thank you. We'll take some 3-4 questions. Yes, please.
The present experience is that better facilities are mostly concentrated in elite areas. So it's very likely that even smart city features will end up in elite areas, depriving the poor and middle class areas.
Yeah, that's inclusivity. Okay.
Reach out to send small parties first, drill in, get the agenda, sharpen it up, and then follow. Thank you.
Okay, small places. This side? Anybody? Yes, please.
So we have a lot of smart technologies for people living in the cities.
Just please use the mic.
We have seen a lot of solutions for making cities smarter. But how do we deal with a lot of migration that is happening from rural areas to smart cities, which are attracting rural populations? So is there any solutions for smart villages as well?
Yeah, okay, dealing with migrant communities.
My question is also related to inclusion.
You need not repeat what has been said. Inclusivity, yes, is already. Yeah, please, quickly.
So we have been to one smart city-like thing in Pune. There they have constructed, they have initiated construction of about 19,000 houses, out of which 4,000 are for the poor people, or for the lower income group. So far they have constructed about 3,000 houses, and out of them 2,500 are occupied. But the per capita or square feet rate ranges from 6,000 rupees to 10,000 rupees per square feet. So it is on lease basis. So at such high rates, is it possible for the poor or even for the higher income people to afford this thing?
Right.
That's the question.
One last question. Yeah. Too many hands. Okay, here. 3, one at a time.
The other question that I have is, what is the balance between the environment and the development? How will smart cities will take care of this, dichotomy of environment and the development? The third question is that one of the speakers, Toras, said that the governance is part of the, the global forces, but not the local authorities. I didn't get that point. I mean, governance is always about the local authorities to administer, not the global agencies. Thank you so much.
I think now we'll stop here and try to get our panelists' answer, and then if there is time, we can go for more. So number one on affordability, who would like to? So Chari, being an Indian question.
I think the whole idea of smart city is to cut down the cost. I mean, put it in a very crude way. It's not about creating, city like GIFT all the time. It is not about creating a city like in, Abu Dhabi, which costs about 2 billion or GIFT 70,000 crores. Smart city is about bringing in efficiencies through learning and technology, if possible.
Yeah, for me, the question is that smart cities shouldn't be expensive because they require different thinking. So the important thing is how you use existing resources and existing technology and make them work better. And that's the dengue example is just that. If you look at the mobile technology around us that is really becoming dominant, you can use it better. So the thinking needs to be, how do we use our resources better to become a smart city? Not how do we spend more money and buy everyone an iPhone.
Well, there's also a question relating to...
I'd like to take a crack at this in the migration question because they're linked together. And, I agree with the previous speakers here. We've seen a lot of interesting gee whiz technologies and images here, but these are the mountaintops of smart cities. The smartness is the things that Chari was talking about, I think, where you use intelligent solutions that you find somewhere and adapt them locally. So, just to cite a couple of examples, the city of Juarez is not a rich city. Juarez, Mexico, it's on the border between the United States and Mexico. And so Juarez had a tremendous migration problem. It also had an affordability issue because of incomes were quite low. But the city leadership in Juarez went to Curitiba in the city of Brazil, 2,500 miles away, discovered that there was a think tank kind of operation going on in Curitiba that had invented lots of interesting innovations, including bus rapid transit, which is now spread to 150 cities around the world, and brought back the idea of a think tank to Juarez. So Juarez got smarter simply because it organized itself and its thinking and its planning better. And so they used some sensors, for instance, to understand how land use was being used and organized land use in a way that was more favorable for incoming migrants. So this is just one way where a not rich city was able to handle the influx of new migrants as it grew.
I mean, I have a go on the side of information overload. Well, information overload, yes, but this reminds me a little bit of what people were concerned about at the beginning of the internet. Now, people would say, there's all this information out there, how are we going to navigate it? There's a lot of good information, but information all mixed together. And yes, it is true. If you take it, we said it a few times today, and if you take all the information produced by the beginning of humanity till 2003, and there you have Shakespeare, you have, you name it, every possible thing, and then that same amount of information we have now every couple of days. Now, it's not the same quality, but the quantity is the same. So the question of information overload is certainly a good one. I think in the same ways, what happened with the internet was then Yahoo and Google and many others started helping us to navigate the information. I think we're seeing something similar now in the Internet of Things, not in the real internet, but in the internet that connects all the world and how we can actually navigate this information in an efficient way. So that's how I would answer that. And just one quick word about the cost of smart cities. Well, I think, it depends. In some cases, actually, I think, if you take something like Uber, is a good example of something like a smart city application. Uber connecting mobility. People who offer mobility could be taxi drivers, could be also private people offering mobility to other person in a peer-to-peer way. That can be an ideal smart city application, but it's not something we need to invest. It actually generates value. It doesn't absorb value. In other cases, you might need to have an investment at the beginning, but in that case as well, it's a bit like investing in a highway. You invest in a highway because you get it back. You get it back because people then will save a lot of time every day, and that has a value for society. So it's good that society will invest in changing a road or building a new train line or whatever it is in order to do, in order then the people will, save time or live better, and that has a value. In the same way, I think in some cases you might want to invest as a city or as a government in order to do something smarter in order for your citizens to benefit. And that has a value.
Let me just address the question on affordability as well as on the big data, right? I think as everybody else has already mentioned that, when we talk about implementing some technology to create a smarter city, right, it has to be for the value that it brings to the city, for citizen participation, citizen empowerment, etc. It can't be just because it's something which is sexy or something that's nice and you want to implement it. So it has to be based on the value, and if it brings the value, then it's affordable. That means the value that it's bringing is more than whatever the cost is. And related to that, the question on the big data, right? There is a whole spectrum of stuff that you can do with the big data, right? There's one spectrum where you're talking about city of sensors, where you capture data to manage traffic and parking and public transport, etc. But then there's another end of the spectrum where you could make use of big data, and I'll take an example of Boston Marathon bombing, right? Now there, to identify the two people who were the culprits, they had to look at all the CCTV cameras. Now CCTV cameras, every city or every big city has CCTV cameras, and they capture tons of footages. And how do you make sense of it? That is big data. How do you analyze the data to make sense of it? And what the Boston police did was to not only look at the CCTV camera footages, but they could not get the real data out of that, because if you see both the guys, they were wearing caps. And most of the CCTV cameras are capturing the photograph from the top, and they could capture the cap. Then they started talking to all the people who were present at the marathon, asked them to share the photographs that they took, and from those photographs they were able to get that information. So it's a combination of different things and to be able to make sense out of it. So big data is not just about doing something sexy in terms of sensors, etc., etc. It's also about something very basic which is available today, which can help the police to be more effective. Thank you. And just I'm from Oracle.
Just to address the question on governance, maybe I didn't make my point clear enough. Basically, what I was trying to say is that power and governance needs to be coordinated on different levels, because if you just give all the power to the most local level, then it's likely that many problems will arise. For instance, yesterday I was attending a session in which a representative of Cairo was speaking of how big a problem it was now for Egypt, the fact that their government is basically so weak that they cannot implement any laws and make them come into effect. So basically the city has become a form of chaos. So of course, ultimately it's the citizens, the ones who have the word and the ones who got
data, right? There is a whole spectrum of stuff that you can do with the big data, right? There's one spectrum where you're talking about city of sensors, where you capture data to manage traffic and parking and public transport, etc. But then there's another end of the spectrum where you could make use of big data, and I'll take an example of Boston Marathon bombing, right? Now there, to identify the two people who were the culprits, they had to look at all the CCTV cameras. Now CCTV cameras, every city or every big city has CCTV cameras, and they capture tons of footages. And how do you make sense of it? That is big data. How do you analyze the data to make sense of it? And what the Boston police did was to not only look at the CCTV camera footages, but they could not get the real data out of that, because if you see both the guys, they were wearing caps. And most of the CCTV cameras are capturing the photograph from the top, and they could capture the cap. Then they started talking to all the people who were present at the marathon, asked them to share the photographs that they took, and from those photographs they were able to get that information. So it's a combination of different things and to be able to make sense out of it. So big data is not just about doing something sexy in terms of sensors, etc., etc. It's also about something very basic which is available today, which can help the police to be more effective. Thank you. And just I'm from Oracle.
Just to address the question on governance, maybe I didn't make my point clear enough. Basically, what I was trying to say is that power and governance needs to be coordinated on different levels, because if you just give all the power to the most local level, then it's likely that many problems will arise. For instance, yesterday I was attending a session in which a representative of Cairo was speaking of how big a problem it was now for Egypt, the fact that their government is basically so weak that they cannot implement any laws and make them come into effect. So basically the city has become a form of chaos. So of course, ultimately it's the citizens, the ones who have the word and the ones who
Of environment and development dichotomy, I think the whole smart city agenda is about resource efficiency. In fact, that is the path we have to go. Give an example, 2 examples. To flush 15 ml of urine, we use 15 liters of water. This hotel uses 15 liters of water to flush 15 ml of urine. It's the most stupid thing to do. The number of buildings that are going to come in the next 20 years are going to be more than the number of buildings that we have built so far in India. So what it means is that if we can integrate energy efficiency in the building, we are actually bringing smartness. Energy security is the most critical thing after water security in cities. So smart city is about resource efficiency.
I think the time is up because I don't think we can allow more questions. I would like to thank all the panelists for their excellent presentations and a very, please, thought-provoking discussion. Before concluding, I think the organizers have a memento for each of the speakers. Dr. Tim Campbell.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Yeah, Carlo Ratti. Yeah, I did change the Professor Carlo Ratti. Yeah. Mr. Gupta, Mr. Philip Weiss, Mr. Torres. Exhausted? Yeah. Professor Chari.